everyone, it's Hailey, and today I'm going to be talking about some books that I've read recently. So I'm doing this video in place of my monthly wrap up because last month I read 5 books and the video was like 20 minutes long, and it's only the 13th of March and I have already read 6 books. So with the way it's going, I feel like it's just going to make more sense to do recent reads instead of doing an end of the month wrap up, because I want to be able to go into depth about these books and not feel like I have to rush through things or else I'll have a super long video, because personally I don't like videos to be like super long. I want to keep it at a reasonable length where everyone will be happy. So that is why I'm doing this. I have some awesome books to talk about today. I have some books that I didn't like so much. It's kind of all over the place, but I'm happy to say that I'm still getting out of my reading slump. I was on a contemporary kick for a while because that was really helping me, and DNFing books has still been very helpful, but I've tried a couple of fantasies. I'm reading one right now, but I've been really busy, so I haven't really had that much time to read, so the timing of that kind of sucks. But the one fantasy that I tried, I didn't like so much, but I will get into all of that while I talk about the books that I read. So let's just get on into it. So the first book that I have to talk about today is Hello Girls by Brittany Cavallaro and Emily Henry. This book is coming out on August 6th and it follows 2 characters, Winona and Lucille, and they are best friends, and they became best friends because they met outside of a police station when both of them were deciding whether or not they wanted to turn their families in. So Winona lives in this illusion. Her father is a celebrity weatherman, but behind closed doors he's actually very abusive, so everything is a front and he's just hiding a lot of crap that he does to her. And Lucille, her family is struggling as well, so her mother is trying really hard to provide for her family, but really it falls on Lucille because her brother is like dealing drugs and there's just a lot of stuff happening there. So they keep on talking about the future and the fact that they are going to take off and finally be on their own and be away from the families that they have been dying to get away from, but they don't know when they'll actually be able to do it. It's a distant future thing, but they actually decide that the time is now. They can't wait anymore, so they take off in a stolen car headed for Las Vegas to start a new life. So going into this, I was obviously intrigued by the plot and the characters because I knew that I was in for a wild ride. I mean, they're taking off in a stolen car toward Las Vegas. Like, you just know that you are in for some wild stuff that's going to be happening, and I felt like I got that to a certain extent, but the intrigue that kept me wanting to read because I wanted to see where the storyline was going because I really had no clue, it didn't make it enough that I really got into it. It definitely kept me going and kept me kind of not realizing that I didn't really care for the story that much until I was like 80% of the way through and I was like, okay, I'm just not really intrigued anymore. That could only take me so far, and now I'm kind of like meh. Personally, for my taste, I felt like the 2 characters were way too similar. I had a hard time distinguishing between the 2, and I don't know if that's because of the author's writing style and that being too similar. Their writing style definitely blended seamlessly together. I just think it may have been a little bit too seamless. I will say I did appreciate the feminist aspect of this story. It's all about them reclaiming their lives and basically shoving the middle finger in the face of everyone who has ever wronged them, especially the men. Particularly, I feel like this was more the story of Winona and her getting back at her father for all that he's done than it was Lucille's story. They were both supposed to be main characters. You get both of their perspectives, but I felt like more of my focus was on Winona and Lucille felt like more of a side character. So the aspects of revenge and friendship and reclaiming their lives, I enjoyed that. However, I feel like their friendship wasn't entirely believable for me because everything felt very forced in the storyline. Nothing felt like it happened completely organically, so I felt like it was a story that was trying really hard, and that's why it was hard for me to really fall into step with it. But I don't think this was a bad book by any means. I just don't think it was one that was entirely for me. I feel like I've read better books that are kind of surrounding this topic that were just more enjoyable. So overall, I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. After that, I picked up The Geography of Lost Things by Jessica Brody. Jessica Brody is the author of one of my favorite books that I read in 2017 technically, but it was in my Bookmas 2018 favorites list, and that was VK chaos of standing still. So I was really excited when I saw that she had a new book out, even though she has quite a few titles, but I haven't read all of them. But this one was a road trip story, and I love travel books, so I was very excited about this one in particular. So this book follows Allie, whose estranged father has just died, and she's not really sure how she feels about it because obviously, like, it's her dad, so she feels like she should be sad, but the relationship was so complicated, and then things are made even more complicated. Even though he's dead, he left her his car, which was his prized possession. It was a 1968 Thunderbird, and she knows that he loved that car, and she has so many memories of him with that car, so it's really difficult for her to have that again. But her family is really struggling. Her mother is not able to pay the bills anymore, so they are facing eviction. So she's like, perfect, I have this car and I can sell it and finally be able to not be evicted. We can pay our rent and we'll be okay. But the car is a stick shift and she doesn't know how to drive stick shift, but her ex-boyfriend sure does. So reluctantly, she agrees to have Nico go with her, and Nico convinces her that she might not need to sell the car after all. They can trade up. So they like get these items and they start with a hair elastic and then they're trying to trade up to something that is worth $25,000. They're posting these things on Craigslist in the hope that she might be able to keep this car because he thinks that she should keep it even though she disagrees. So just imagine having exes stuck in such a small space, and there's just so much tension. But this wasn't just a romantic story, and that's what I really enjoy with my contemporaries. I like them to be romantic. I like to have a fun one every now and again, but I also love the layers, and I think that Jessica Brody does a great job of that. With the two contemporaries that I've read of hers, I've been really happy with that. So while there was this like slow burn tension where you're like, will they, won't they? There was also a lot of fun aspects and a lot of really touching aspects. It's a story about Allie learning to grieve something that she felt like she never had, and a story about her finding herself as well. It's really a trip of self-discovery. She was a really difficult character because she's very complex. You kind of just want to shake her and be like, listen to yourself, look at the big picture here, and just like snap out of it, because she is so stuck in her head that she doesn't see what's right in front of her. I felt like there were a lot of really fun quirks that this story had. Like the trading up thing was so interesting. I didn't expect that at all when I was going into this. And then I also loved the fact that she was so obsessed with taking personality quizzes. I felt like that was so relatable for me because I don't know who I am, so I'm like, let's take a personality quiz and be like, what cupcake I want tells me who I am. Perfect. I'll listen to that. So I really liked that, and I liked the fact that there were little quizzes like that that were interspersed throughout the story. It just made it that much more fun to read. I feel like this is a story that had three main characters, and that would be obviously Allie. Nico was a big character as well, and then her father was the other character. I do wish that there were other characters that were brought into it. Particularly, I wanted to know a bit more about her mother and their relationship, but I totally understood why that didn't happen. I was happy enough learning about Allie because she was a very flawed and relatable character, and Nico was a great character as well. I was happy with who we got. I just kind of wanted a few more characters in there so then I could get a big picture of what Allie's life is like. There were also, like a lot of other books, and her other book did this too, and it's one of those things that I kind of love-hate. It's when they have this allusion to this big thing that happened, and then you have to wait until basically the very end of the book to find out what that was. And I will say, I found the payoff for this one was a little bit disappointing, but it wasn't enough for me to not like the book overall. I was just kind of like, oh, that was it? Like, yeah, it's a big thing, but it wasn't as big as I was expecting. It wasn't like that pow moment. But this still was a very complex and layered story, and I really enjoyed it overall, so I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I read On the Come Up by Angie Thomas. Finally, Angie Thomas is the author of The Hate U Give, of course, which absolutely exploded onto the scene, so I was kind of nervous going into her second novel. You know, I feel like you don't get 2 hits. Like, that's such an intimidating thing to have such a smash success with your first novel, and then you're like, okay, how can I follow that up? But she did an amazing job. This was just so good. So this book is also set in Garden Heights, which was a really fun aspect to it, but it follows Bree, and Bree is the daughter of an underground rap legend that died before he could ever make it big, and she has always dreamt of being a rapper. She wants to be the rap star that he never got the chance to be, and she wants to make a name for herself aside from her father. She wants to just be known as Bree, not Bree, the daughter of this main major rap star. As she's trying to find success, the stakes become higher than ever when her mother unexpectedly loses her job, and they are suddenly fighting to keep the lights on, to keep the gas going in their house, and to keep their house entirely in general. I didn't really know a lot about this book going into it. I knew that it dealt with rap, and I knew that it was by Angie Thomas, so that was enough for me to want to read it. But I was really delightfully surprised when, in the first little bit, there's something that happens that sets off the course of events. So it kind of follows the same sort of framework of The Hate U Give, but it still manages to be its own story, and it's still a very impactful and powerful story on its own. Specifically, when that event happened, I could think of things that I had seen on social media, and I feel like she just does such a great job of fictionalizing these realistic stories that you can kind of connect them to real life, and she always has a moral to things, but you don't feel like you're being moralized at. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but I just feel like I learn a lot reading her books, and I think that they're important for everyone to read, in all honesty. This book dealt heavily with racial profiling and the angry Black woman stereotype, and I think that these are very, very important things to unpack and address because they shouldn't exist at all, and I loved the fact that this novel was able to do that while still remaining a very fun story at its core. Another thing that she does really well is write these characters that you fall in love with, and particularly the bonds between these characters. They are so strong and unbreakable, and the family units that she presents, I love a book that deals with family at its center, or friendship. I love romance as well, but I love when you have that family connection there, and this, once again, just like The Hate U Give, had such an amazing family that I just rooted for, and I wanted the very best for them the entire time. There was also a great friendship happening, and I feel like more so than in The Hate U Give, there's a great romance happening. I feel like that was more of a topic in this book than it was in her previous book. Using hip-hop as a vessel to explore the different things that she wanted to address in this book was really cool because it was something that I admittedly don't know a lot about, but I felt like it lent itself perfectly to what she was trying to do, and I think it was so successful. You have Bree, who is a really flawed character at her core, and she's someone that you root for and you can understand, and I loved seeing the development that she went through, not only in terms of her hip-hop career, but in terms of her life in general. This just solidified the fact that I think that Angie Thomas is such an incredible author, and I will read anything that she writes. She does such a great job of writing these stories that have so many layers to them, and they really encourage readers to get out and speak up for what they believe in, and I just think that is such a beautiful thing, and that is why I love reading. She reminds me of why I love reading, so obviously I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, and if you haven't read it yet, you should. Next, I picked up another 5-star read. I have 3 5-star reads this year already. That is so amazing, but the next one is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I really don't want to get into the plot of this too much. Basically, it's set in the 1970s and follows this rock band, and it's told in an interview style format. Like, there's no real frame tale here. It's just interviews. So this is our first Bookmarked book club pick of the month. Yay! And it was such a great one to start out with, but I will have the link for the Goodreads group and all of that stuff down below for Bookmarked if you wanted to join us in reading this. We will be having a live show discussion at the end of the month on March 31st, a Sunday, I believe at like 3 p.m. or something like that. All those details are to come. But so far, I've already been discussing this a lot with Hannah because she also loved it, and Zoe is still working her way through it, and we just want her to finish it. But this was my absolute favorite audiobook that I have ever listened to. And I've listened to a lot of audiobooks, but it's told by a full cast, the interview format. I honestly think if I had physically read it, I would not have enjoyed it nearly as much as I enjoyed that audiobook. I listened to it all in one shift at work, and I could not stop listening to it. I was like, I need to know what is happening, what is going on, because I just became so engrossed in the story of Daisy and the Six and everything about them. I just was like, I need to know more. Now, Evelyn Hugo, I really liked, but I didn't enjoy it as much as this one, and I don't know if it's because that already had so much hype hype surrounding it, so I felt like I had to really enjoy it. And I truly didn't dislike Evelyn Hugo. It's just, this was such an indescribable, absolute experience for me going through the story. And I felt like with the interview format, that's so difficult. Like, how can you build up this story? How can you get this whole timeline? Because it covers a very vast period of time. And how can you get to know so many characters? Because there's a lot of characters too, but she did it. Like, she did the damn thing and did a great job of it. Every single character was so incredibly layered. There was not one single character that I felt like was one-dimensional and I didn't care about them. I cared about every single one of them and I wanted to know more about every single one of them, but I felt like I knew them in real life and it was just so much. Like, I feel like this was a historical fiction podcast that I was listening to, even though it totally wasn't. It's all fiction, but it doesn't make sense. She did the same thing with Evelyn Hugo, where like, I feel like they're real people and I want to know more about them. I feel like this was pretty similar to Evelyn Hugo in some ways. Evelyn Hugo is an interview format as well, but this wasn't really a frame tale interview format. There's only like one point where you get kind of a frame tale going on, and that was so unexpected. And like the last bit of this, if you're feeling skeptical, I do encourage you, like, I'm very into DNFing right now, as you know, but give it until that last little bit, those last like 100 or so, maybe even 50 pages. I don't know, because I listened to the audiobook. I would say it was like the last hour of the audiobook. I was like, what is happening? Oh my God. And it was just such an emotional experience and it was all just so much. It was overwhelming. So this was really just an unexpected story. It wasn't something that I thought I would fall in love with because I like music, but I'm not really that into it. And I'm not really into like 70s rock and roll. I do really like Queen, but I don't know when Queen is actually from. It's just not one of those things that I'm really passionate about, but like, it was just so good. I'm making my sister listen to the audiobook now. I highly encourage you to listen to the audiobook. I do have a link down below for Amazon if you wanted to sign up for an Audible free trial. Then you can get 2 free audiobooks. Do this one, please. Once again, I'm not even trying to promo myself. I just want you to listen to this book, please, and then come and talk about it with us at Bookmarked because we are going to have a lot to discuss. I'm probably going to listen to it again before Bookmarked because ooh, it was so good. So once again, 5 out of 5 stars, obviously. So after reading so much contemporary and so much realistic fiction, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to try out a fantasy again, to try getting back there because I feel like some people are misconstruing. I love fantasy. I really do, but I went through such a period of time where fantasy was all that I was reading. So not having that break in between, like having to learn about all of these new worlds made it very tiresome for me. So I kind of fell out of love with it for a bit, but I do really love it and I want to get back into it. So I'm just trying to kind of ease my way there and I feel like I'm ready now. I just kind of chose a bad time since I've been really busy, but the first fantasy that I read was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Brigid Kemmerer. I actually lent this out to a friend because she was interested in reading it, so I don't have my copy on me anymore. So I felt like this was the perfect fantasy to start out with because it's a modern retelling of Beauty and the Beast. So it's partially in our world, partially in a fantasy world, as it's like an urban fantasy retelling. So it's like, perfect. That will be really easy to kind of ease me back into it. Prince Ren is doomed to repeat the same season of his 18th year over and over and over again until he gets someone to fall in love with him and then he will be saved. But at the end of each season, he turns into this horrible beast that ends up killing and destroying absolutely everything in his wake. So then Harper ends up getting sucked into his world, but she already has a lot going on back home. Her father is absent, her mother is dying, and her brother is getting involved in some pretty crappy things. So she's trying to hold her family together, but she's constantly underestimated by her brother in particular because of her cerebral palsy. So while she has a lot going on at home, she ends up getting into his kingdom and is just like, what's happening here? What am I supposed to do? And then, you know, it's Beauty and the Beast, so it's the last chance for him to save his kingdom, and conveniently we have a girl here, so maybe they'll fall in love. So picking this up, I was hoping that I would get a fun, cute romance, and I loved some parts of it. I really loved the cerebral palsy representation. I don't think that disabilities get enough representation in young adult fiction in particular, and really just in general. So I thought that was great to see, and I thought it was well done, but I encourage you to look up some Own Voices reviewers and see what they say. But from what I've seen, people are saying that it is good representation, which is awesome. I also really liked the Beauty and the Beast retelling aspect. It brought to mind the movie me, particularly the Emma Watson one, just because it's more recent. It made me think of it a lot. Like, I feel like I could pinpoint particular scenes and like where it would kind of fit in. So I felt like it really stayed true to that original Beauty and the Beast story while also adding a twist. However, I felt like it was just a really generic and boring book in general. I got pretty far into it and I was like, maybe it's just because I'm busy, maybe it's because it's my first fantasy that I'm trying out, but I was like, this is way too long and I'm bored. That was also really difficult for me because I've been seeing this book on Instagram and Twitter and everywhere and people are loving it, but I didn't at all. But I guess I shouldn't say I didn't at all, because there are things that I liked about it, but I didn't get the romance that I was looking for, and I felt like it was entirely a one-dimensional story. There was a lot of information that would be presented, but it would never be expounded upon, so I didn't really get a feel for the world. I didn't quite understand a lot of things, and I didn't understand a lot of facets of the characters. There were also just a lot of random things that were going on. There were so many things thrown into Harper's life back home that I felt like it was way too much, and it didn't really add anything to the storyline. So I felt like there was just a lot trying to be brought in and nothing was really done to its full potential because there were so many different facets that were trying to be thrown into one like tiny box. So overall, I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. Unfortunately, it just wasn't for me. I do understand why people are liking it. I think I've just read way too much fantasy for it to be something that I would enjoy, especially Beauty and the Beast retellings, because there are a lot out there. So it's just kind of meh for me. And the last book I wanted to talk about in this video is one that I actually DNF'd, and that was Dear Evan Hansen by Val Emmich. I started listening to the audiobook for this one, but I just don't think it's for me. I'm sure the musical is great and I would love to see it, but I just didn't really like the author's writing. There were some things that I kind of just made me cringe and I just couldn't really get into the story. So I was listening to the audiobook, but unfortunately I put it down, and that's okay because DNFing is great. So those are all the books that I wanted to talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you like when I do this instead of my wrap-ups. I feel like I'm able to go a little bit more into depth and tell you some more about these books, which I think is fun. I don't know, but if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to click that subscribe button and then click that bell icon so you'll be notified whenever I post. I post new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm also a part of the Bookmarked live show, which is held every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, but all the information for that will be down below for you guys, as well as our book club. You can also follow me on all of my social media. All of my handles and links and all that stuff will be down below for you guys. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!